I am Jacob Kelley. I am 29 years old. I'm from Berwick, Pennsylvania. My pronouns are they, them. How I sort of fit into the LGBTQA plus community is I am non-binary and I am queer sexual. So I do both my gender and sexuality are non-hetero, non-cisgender, sort of say. And I'm a drag queen, so I do a lot within the community of just creating queer spaces, inclusive spaces around many different counties of Pennsylvania.
And was the phrase that you used queer sexual?
Yes, queer sexual is a thing, so I don't use the term gay for myself, although to make it easier, gay is a term that can fit into it, so.
Okay. So you did say your pronouns are they, them.
Yes.
You're living in the Berwick area, correct?
Yes, I live in the Berwick area.
Is that where you grew up?
Yes, so I grew up in Berwick. I was not born here, I was actually born in Hawaii. But I grew up in Berwick, Pennsylvania, and I still live there, but I do a lot for different things related to work I have done, and I do a lot of volunteerism, and I'm the co-president of one of our local sort of activist groups. It's called the Association for Inclusion, Respect, and Equity. I'm their co-president, and so we cover 5 different counties, as Northumberland being one of them.
Is that that's a organization that was started by you, or?
So this organization was originally started in 1992 in the town of Bloomsburg to combat against racism that was happening in that town. And then essentially it grew much bigger than to what it is today. So the organization oversees several different committees that are working committees in our group. So we have one specifically for racial equity, women in action, LGBT, but we actually have our LGBT, it's grown so much we broke it down into different counties such as Columbia, Montour, and then Snyder Union in Northumberland. So the group itself originally started to actually combat against racism within the town and just grew from there. And so many people wanted to get involved and had passions, and that's actually how we have a growing population in our LGBT community that actually are here to educate, show visibility, and acceptance for everyone.
So do you have any connections to this area, meaning Sunbury, Northumberland, Snyder, Union, Montour, like family, friends? Have you ever lived in this area?
I've never lived in this area, but I have a lot of friends in this area. So my drag mother, Tequila Daniels, lives in this area, and Cece's Bar used to be a great gay bar that was back in the day here that I used to perform at all the time. So I actually started drag in my journey of being a queer leader at Cece's Bar when I performed there, meeting people, networking, and then now I just I work within it within different means. You know, we do the Albright Center. We did our first Pride here last year. I performed at a brunch down at Little Addie's last year as well. So like the connections have just grown for Northumberland County. I also used to work in Northumberland County covering. I actually worked out in Shamokin. And have also then allowed me to also work out here in Sunbury as well. So,
okay. So talk to me about some of your background as far as education goes. Are you working for your doctorate? Did I hear that? Mm-hmm. Someone told me that.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about your education.
So education-wise, I actually have my bachelor's from Bloomsburg University in psychology and communications, but then I decided to go for my master's in human sexuality education. So I am a sex educator. And I'm currently working on my PhD. I am a PhD student at Widener University studying human sexuality philosophy to be a doctor that specializes in sex education and specifically human sexuality. So the understanding for myself and the education I have in that field and background is specific to, I educated myself in the different areas of sexuality, gender, sex, the understanding of relationships, building communication amongst ourselves. I also have a background of working in HIV, so which is heavily connected to the LGBTQA community in this area. So,
is your goal then to be a professor, or is it to go place to place and educate, or what's your goal?
Yeah, so I actually own my own business. It's Mix Kelley Queer Education, and it's a queer inclusive sex educator consultant business. So I do workshops, consulting, performances, speaking. Specifically around the importance for LGBTQA inclusion, but also how it ties to sex education. So for myself, I don't ever want to work at a university, but the independency I have to go to colleges, to go to businesses, to organizations, I'll take the Rainbow Alliance, who's up in Wilkes-Barre, hired me to create content for them about coming out. So I created all this content for them that they're able to use on their own website and things like that. So my goal is to be an independent individual who people can actually, when they say who's an expert in this field, they know it's me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is, so is drag and these sort of, I guess, seminar events, if that's what you want to call them, or educational events, mm-hmm. Is that how you make your living, or do you have a side hustle?
So my main job currently is I work as the Director of Workplace Culture for Community Action Association of Pennsylvania. And Community Action Association of Pennsylvania is a state nonprofit association that oversees and assists with the community action agencies across the Commonwealth. My title in itself is I do diversity, equity, inclusion, workshops, trainings, programming for the 42 out of 43 organizations across the Commonwealth. So that's my day job that I do Monday through Thursday, a few other days too, but it just depends what it is. So my current business that I own is my side hustle, which I'm hoping grows into my main job. But my background in community work, nonprofits, diversity, equity, inclusion has been there for years.
Okay. So you have a lot of time where you're traveling, I bet.
Yes, I travel a lot. I like to stay in the area in northeastern Pennsylvania, slightly north central, but I do travel a lot. I go different places with drag. I travel across the state to other states. So I would say I'm a busy person in that aspect.
I'm glad that you're able to make some time to come here today. With your do you have a coming out story?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So here's the easiest answer every time I get this when I go. Everyone always comes out. I have come out, and I come out by being visible myself. So one of the ways I have come out isn't by saying I'm this, like this is my identity. That's never been my story, and it never will be my story. My story is I show up. I show up in the space as authentically as I can, as comfortable as I can, while also not like diminishing who I am, sort of say. And, questions then come up like, oh, you look really nice, and people want, like, it's that general sense as a queer person when I show up and I look queer, as I do today, people are going to look. And for me, I'm not doing it to get attention. I'm not here to break the status quo. I'm here to just show up as me. And for years, that's all I've done, is show up as me. I've fought internal battles with myself to coming out, so my internal story of coming out is waking up one day and saying, you know what, I want to be who I am, and who I am, and who I know I am, which is being non-binary, being a person of visibility, being, gay, or how I like to say queer sexual from my experiences, to know, like, who I am shouldn't be judged and should not be the main focus of who I am, right? So, like, that's the one thing I try to do is, for me, coming out has always just been, I'm showing up. If you have questions, we can talk about them. But essentially, like, I'm not going to ask ever for acceptance. I'm going to demand it. I'm going to demand that I be accepted and respected in these spaces by being me and by showing up. So it's a very direct way to say I'm coming out in the way, but for me, there's no conversation in the sense like, hi, this is who I am. On one end, I do have a close circle. I had to tell my best friend, like, hey, I just want to tell you, like, this is a thing, because my best friend has always known me as one way, and so when I transition or come out into these other areas, it's like, then I have to inform my close circles. But even those conversations, they're not much. It's, hi, just call me Jake, my pronouns are they, them, this is how I'm going to dress, and if you don't like it, then you can leave.
That's a lot of confidence.
Yes. I'm very self-assurance. Like, I have very high self-assurance of who I am. I'm not going to back down from anyone because of who I am. It is scary. A lot of people like, that's confidence. And I use this phrase of, I make it, even though I make it look easy, it doesn't mean it's not heavy. And I use that saying of, like, I do have confidence. I know how to be very assured of who I am. But there are times that even the strongest moments, I look like nothing's bothering me. Internalized, I still am like, is it going to be okay? Am I going to get these weird questions? Is anyone going to attack me? What are these things that are going to happen? So at the end of the day, though, I will always choose my happiness over the comfortability of others.
When you were a kid, were you aware of being non-binary, or did you feel like people were telling you that you were one way, and that's not how you felt? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, when I was a kid, when I was a youngster, I actually, more people told me I was, like, gay was the term for everything, right? Like, you just use gay to whatever the word was. Since the new language towards non-binary and transgender and these other identities only have really been articulating service within the last 10 years. But for me as a kid, yes, everyone would be like, oh, you're gay. Oh, like, there's something different about Jake. And so a lot of people would tell me that. And for me, I never looked at it as, like, this lens of, like, well, what do you mean? I actually, as a kid, I did what I wanted to do. I was a weird kid. I was a dork. I used the word dork as, like, a thank you to all my people who are weird nerds and geeks. Like, that was me. I definitely didn't express myself as feminine as I do now out of fear of bullies. My parents weren't as accepting as kids to this variety. I remember when I did show up as full expressed myself, or even my parents have seen me in drag, and like that was a whole moment itself. But as a kid, I knew I was different. I remember actually I coming out as 14 to myself as like, no, I'm gay. I'm a homosexual. I like this, but I only said it to myself. I never said it to anyone else. And then it wasn't until after I got out of high school that I started to learn a better understanding of myself, and I went through hard stages of self-hate and internalizing stuff, and then eventually I was like, who's going to stop me? And then it actually wasn't until I was in my master's program I started learning more terms about gender, since I've always saw myself as, like, I'm not a man. Like, I'm not a man, but I'm also not a woman. And so I didn't know how to articulate that until I was in my master's program, and I actually read and talked to other people who were like me, who had the same thoughts, and I was like, this sounds just like me. I remember hearing someone's story, and I was like, I'm that. Like, that's who I am. So, but as a kid, I had an internal sense of knowing. I just didn't know how to articulate it, which is why I find it so important now. Education around these topics is important. So when we have those terms, we can not have to stress about, like, who am I, how do I fit in this world of identity, and I can move past that and be like, all right, this is who I am, this is how I articulate it, and now I can live my life, how I want to.
What was going on at age 14 that you said to yourself, all right, this is it?
So a lot of conflicting thoughts I had, which was, it was actually pretty simple. I was around some of my friends, and they would always talk about, like, the people they were attracted to, and I never really put two and two together. I'm like, I'm not attracted to women the same way some of my male friends are. When I look at women, sort of say, I don't look at them in this sexualized way. I see it as more of like a beauty or this neutral set of, like, you're powerful or something like that. And I didn't realize people didn't see it that way either. So then I had a friend that was talking to me, and she was talking to me about her boyfriend at the time in high school, and I was like, actually, I had a crush on somebody that I was like, I think about them that way, but I thought that was normal, sort of say, like, for a person like me to think about another guy that way, even though I never spoke about those kind of things. So eventually, I came to the conclusion of, like, that's who I am. I'm gay in the sense of, like, my sexuality. My gender I never actually questioned. I just let myself express myself in different ways with restrictions. My household didn't allow me to express myself fully, which is okay to a degree. I don't hate my parents for not being as open-minded to how I express myself, but, like, now they're completely okay with it. So that journey took some time. But at 14, it was a lot of mixed, it was my society, right? Like, who taught me about sexuality and culture was my classrooms of friends, right? It was the environment of friends talking to friends, right? 14-year-olds talking to other 14-year-olds, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. So there was no direct conversation. That kind of stuff was never directly talked to about. Like, even my own parents never talked about it.
You mentioned took a while for your parents to get to a place of acceptance. Was Was it rough for you, or was it always just maybe more low?
It was a secret that you didn't say, right? You go to grandma's house, you're like, we don't talk about this. We're not talking about this. You can't dress like that, you know. Boys don't wear makeup. My dad questioned me one time and was like, I'm just kind of confused on what's going on. And I remember looking at my dad and just going, you can be confused, but that doesn't mean you have to question it to question me. You should question yourself why you are confused by it. And I mean, I was 15 at the time when I told my dad that. And he just goes, you're right, I will look into that myself. And my father and I have a really great relationship on communicating those type of things. So he eventually was just like, you know what, my kid's not harming anyone, so I really don't care this other side of who my son is, which would be me. And then for my mom, she was a bit more silent, so you can tell, like, she never verbally was, like, hateful, but her nonverbals did, right? She became silent. When a topic came up, you go, okay, we're not talking about that now, right? Like, it's automatically shut down, shutting and avoiding all topics about it. And eventually, like, these, we didn't talk about those things. So at home, I had to kind of, like, keep it all to myself. I wasn't able to talk about it to anyone really at home, or when I was home, I had to present a different way. And then when I went out in public, I can present my own way. And so eventually, it wasn't until I was 2020 when I was like, hey, this is, like, I'm going to college, I'm living at home still since I commuted from Berwick to Bloomsburg and working and all that. And I was like, you know what, one day I woke up and I was like, I'm aware of this, I'm gonna be me. And, my parents they didn't want to question because they didn't want the conversation, and that was their level of tolerance. They had a toleration to it, and eventually that grew into acceptance. So they started with tolerance because we're their kids, and they were like, I don't want to hate my kid, but I also don't feel comfortable with my kid doing this. And then it grew into, no, we do accept our kid.
Okay. So. Peers, school, bullies, anything like that?
Oh, 100%. I have been bullied since the first grade on my queerness. The first time I ever got called faggot, I was in first grade, 7 years old. And why? Because I'm a very affectionate person, so I had this friend I just, like, kissed, sort of say, but not in, like, a romantic way. That was just who I was as a kid, very affectionate, and I kissed this boy just, like, on the hand or something out of, like, friendship, and then that took off to just being like, well, faggot, like, that was the term. And then I never did it again because, like, then that followed me through forever. Like, I have been called that still till today. So, but with school and my peers, like, I have been bullied, and I didn't even have terms back then, right? 7 years old, I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what any of this is. But the other kids in my class are calling me gay and saying these horrible things. But then, like, I even had friends. I actually have friends who admired me because to a level, they never showed a way. I had friends who admired it because eventually I just had thick enough skin. I was like, I'm not gonna let this bother me. And so I think that's where I grew this self-assurance that, like, you can call me all these names and be bullies to me, but I will always find a way for resilience to bounce back. And so I have been shoved and pushed and all that in high school, in middle school. The locker rooms were the worst place to ever exist. I hate going into locker rooms. It's actually like a PTSD moment of feeling like someone will harm me. Locker rooms for me were the worst because that was when bullying happened the most. The people said a lot of hurtful things. People mocked me. People tried doing sexual gestures towards me to mock my sexuality, even though I never came out in high school or middle school. People would put their hands on me and make jokes and these things, and it wasn't a good place at that time. So.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to unravel all
No,
that.
that's okay.
But I don't always like talking about those negative consequences because those are the hurdles I had to grow from and grow out of. And a lot of people are like, that doesn't happen. It does. And I'm not the only story. I wasn't the only queer kid. We actually had three or four others that I can remember who were out. I was actually the one that wasn't out, and I still got those labels because of how I presented. And I didn't even present like this. I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but when I walked with the sway. When I talked with my hands. When I had that quote unquote feminized voice. So all of those things were there, and then eventually, like, I grew a passion towards LGBTQA culture. I remember doing my first speech when I was 14 in public speaking about what it is to be gay from the scientific standard. And so eventually I embraced this difference of who I was and what it is, but the reality to behind that is people were jerks. Like, people are still mean, people still bullied. And today, now I just get bullied by adults, so it looks completely different, but that's okay. Like, it's not okay, but I'm a person of, I think why I'm such a leader in this community is I know how to handle it.
Where did you find the best bright spots from people or supporters or peers?
When you say, can you explain bright spots? Like, explain what you mean.
A teacher that maybe you confided in, or a neighbor or something like that.
So I had Joanna Mercer is one of my favorite teachers. She still teaches at Burke Area High School, and we've had these conversations now that I'm older. She and a few other teachers is one of those teachers who knew I was different. We used to write journals, and only the teachers would read them, but they would grade us on like how we would be journaling and do all that. And I remember in that journal, I spilled my heart out. And I remember one day after class, I just go, I know you read my journal, and I'm very vulnerable at this moment. I'm using language now today. Back then, I said it differently, but vulnerable. And I just remember she said, I'm not going to tell anyone because it's not for me to tell, but at the same time, like, I'm here for you if you need anything. And having just a teacher know that I exist and who I am was the most relieving thing. I remember just walking into that classroom then and just knowing I was accepted by at least one person. And then I did have a few friends that it didn't matter who I was. I even had friends I came out to after high school. They were like, I remember one of them going, actually, we kind of knew, but also, like, we didn't care because we loved who you were. And those dynamics in high school was comforting because I think back, they're some of my closest friends till today. Like, I have really good, we communicate still, we talk still, and some of them call me now for their support in our adult lives. But in high school, it was that one teacher and a few others who really allowed that comfort to be like, okay, if one person knows, I feel safe, right? Like, I can go to them if I need something. And then I remember my guidance counselor was another. Phenomenal woman, April. She was another one around my senior year. I was like, I want to talk to you and stuff. And she just goes, she always said that we were a force to be reckoned with, and we never let anyone stop us regardless of who I was. And she was another one who just really impacted that. I'm pretty sure if I did not have them, I wouldn't really be here, so to say. I had suicidal ideations at the age of 14 from sort of the stuff that was happening, but I grew from that, and the support from the teachers and some of my friends actually really made a difference.
What is it like now for you? Now,
it's to be openly queer now, and I use queer as the sense of just all-encompassing. It's good. It's better. It's a lot better. I definitely know I'm a force to be reckoned with in the community of how much I do. The hate I sort of get, I challenge now are definitely in politics and legislation and having those conversations. In town, I go to town meetings and talk to mayors and town council members who I have challenged whether or not they accept people in their towns. And it's been an interesting, yes and no, or like kind of but not really, or like we've had some people be really super positive and we've had others, I don't want to say super negative, but I'm in such a position now of knowing who I am that I know I intimidate people even though I'm not intimidating. I just show up and they're like, there's a real person in front of me who is actually challenging us on the fact of, do you actually respect and include queer people or LGBTQA plus people in your towns? And I deal with parents a lot, actually. I have two sides of parents who reach out. I have parents who reach out for support for either their own kids or how they can help other kids. And then I have sometimes others that, call me an abomination, sinful words. I have a lot of these areas are very heavily based in religious beliefs that I have to, a lot of the time, just go, thank you for telling me your opinions on what you believe in, but I'm still existing, so whether you think I'm a sinner or shouldn't be involved in certain things is not for you to decide or to tell me what I can do.
What town councils have you gone to?
So we did proclamations for our first Pride we ever did in Bloomsburg. So the towns that I've specifically been to, or at least involved with, was Bloomsburg, Berwick, Danville. Those were my first three I did, and then they believe we did Riverside, if I'm correct, and I believe we also did Northumberland County's commissions, Montours, and Columbia County commissioners. So we did, for the ones that I've been to on top of my head, those were the ones that we've been involved. We've also tried Sunbury as well, and Lewisburg and stuff. So Sunbury had a good response. I don't think they were hateful at all. They didn't really have a remark of saying our proclamation, but at the same time, like, they didn't. They have a diversity, equity, inclusion on their council, so it was actually a good thing that they understood what we were talking about. But I think Danville was the only one that we had the most issues with, actually.
So you've done drag performances at the Albright Center. You said Little Abby's. Mm-hmm. There was another one that you mentioned that was close by.
We actually did the Pride here last year.
Pride. Yeah. Okay.
We did Route 61.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I might have been at that one.
Yeah.
Are you the main organizer of those?
So there's 4 of us that it's my drag family. We're drag family, but there's 4 of us that do it, and we all kind of take turns. So yes, out of it's not a one person thing, it's a group effort. So the 4 of us actually stick together, we get the contracts, and we all talk together. So I'm one of 4 that actually come together to do all of these events. We're always in them because we're always working together, because there's multiple pieces that go together, just like getting the performers or DJ, all the logistics, but then for me, I'm the one that's like, all right, do we have the space for this? Do we know what the backlash is going to be? Do we have people we have to talk to? Are there contracts we have to look over? So that's the stuff I handle.
What is your persona?
Trixie Valentine. So I am Trixie Valentine, and that's spelled Trixy. And I've been doing drag for over 9 years. I started in 2014 and at CC's Bar. Actually, that was here in Sunbury, so it was a great time. Tequila Daniel's a local legend here. She's been doing drag for years. And then Alexis Daniel has been doing drag even longer than her. So if we look at drag-wise, there's me, my drag mother. And drag mother means someone who mentored me, right? Someone who's helped me into drag. So there's Tequila Daniels, but above Tequila is her mother, who's been in this area too, Alexis Daniels. So it's kind of like this trickling effect of we have all these different peoples. And then there's the one, my child, Xander Valentine, who's been doing drag slightly longer than me, but where I started, I ended up helping them evolve a little bit more and expand more. So with the 4 of us, we all are from this area, or around in this area very close by, that we just decided to, it was literally me calling them and going, I want to do more than what we're doing, let's do it. And then we just find venues and go, can we do a show here? Let's talk about what that looks like. And drag in this area has become a gateway and a good way to allow queer spaces. So we've actually seen a growing need of progression towards the community, but also people in the community. I've hugged so many people from just having drag shows, because it's the first time these people feel that they could exist in this town or this area.
What brought you to drag? What was it about the...
So I've actually always been a performer. So in high school I was in color guard, I did theater. And then after high school I joined a belly dance group. I actually learned how to do belly dancing and traveled with them on the East Coast, Antipode. And this feeling of needing to be in front of people and performing has always been there. But two things. One, I remember watching RuPaul when it wasn't popular, when it was like season 3, and I remember watching Manila Luzon lip sync against Delta Work, and I fell in love with this feeling I didn't know I was having by watching them, this passion, this theatrical expression. And I was like, I'm feeling something watching this other person perform on my TV right now, and I was like, I love that feeling. Then I went to my first drag show. They had it was 18 and up, so as long as you wore a wristband and they checked IDs and stuff, it was okay to go in, and I went, and this was at CC's. And I remember watching Tequila Daniels step out onto that stage, and when I say she took my breath away. It was it was the moment I was like, I don't know why I feel so empowered. Like, I feel so good about myself. She is, lip syncing, giving a performance, a story, and I feel so good about myself. I feel so empowered. And from that moment, I was like, no, I want to do this. Like, I want to be able to empower others. And that is how, taking the things I loved of performing and then also being able to empower others. And so that's really what drag is. It's more than just, a show. It's empowering others in a way that is artistic and colorful and challenge ideology. Drag can challenge ideology in different areas around gender, sexuality, and among other things, culturally too. So eventually that's what really started me, is seeing those two things. And I will say I'll give a shout out to my twin. My twin is Harvey Daniels. They're a drag queen as well. They also are non-binary and queer. But with that, Harvey Daniels started drag about 6 months before I did, so it was a little bit easier to have my own twin to help me through those steps, because they also went through those steps, and they were a huge support in my starting. So I do want to give them a shout out of helping me behind the scenes a little bit to also get on that stage. But yeah, that's.
When you say twin, is that a drag term, or do you literally mean...
Literally twin.
Okay.
Yep,
okay.
I'm a twin.
Mm-hmm. So your twin is also non-binary?
Mm-hmm.
Huh, okay.
And a drag queen. They're actually more well known as a drag queen, but I won't tell their story.
Yeah.
Their story. They're actually, you just Google Harvey Daniels and you can find their story. They're internationally known.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Runs in the family.
Yeah.
Family business. So when you performed in this area, the recent ones with Albright Center and Little Addie's, were there any protests or any backlash or?
So we get a lot of online backlash. People like to make comments on our posts, so that we typically have to block them or take them down or hide them. There's a lot of people who have opinions online. A lot of we do get sometimes private messages from like profiles that have like one person following them. So people make accounts just to troll us, and so that does exist. We've had threats of being protested. I believe the only protest that ever existed was when they did the story hour at the library here in Sunbury. I didn't perform on that one, but I remember when it happened, and because it's only right next to the Albright Center, I was like, well, people have the ability to do it. So we've seen it in different drag events. Actually, the one that just happened in Berwick, we had about 12 protesters. So we get them occasionally, but I hate to say this, we take it as a joke a little bit, in the sense of like, you really came out here to spew hate. Cool. Like, we didn't think it exists, but in this area, but it does. Like, to visibly show it. A lot of the times, though, it's just people online, and they talk a lot. It's our keyboard warriors, right? It's the ones that just have a lot to say, and nobody actually wants to have a conversation, I will say that. So, I'll use the Albright Center, a perfect example. When we started them, I ended up having a conversation with their board. And so just to educate them a little bit on, like, this isn't just a drag show, you're supporting queer culture, which means you have to also carry the burden of some of that backlash. It can't just be on us. And so after that conversation, they agreed. Like, they were like, we will do better in supporting you and being inclusive and figuring out how to help you. So that was a perfect example for me to be like, if we just talked and had a conversation, you would understand where we're coming from in some of these situations, that when people speak out against us, we do need a level of support.
Backing up here a second, does CC is that still around?
CC's is no longer around.
Okay.
Unfortunately, everyone asks us. We wish it was, but it's not anymore.
Yeah, I remember CC's being a thing when I was a kid because everybody knew that was the gay bar.
Yeah.
You know, quote unquote. So, but I couldn't remember if it was still around.
Well, we're actually still impressed. I am, at least. I say we as with me and my friends, because now we do have a gay bar back in Sunbury. It's the Roy G. Viv, and it's cute. It's a little bit different. It's just hard to do drag in there, but I think we do work with them and collaborate with them when we have these events. We tell people like, go there after the show and things like that, and they've been super supportive to us as well, with the events. So it's a give and take. So I will say shout out to them for bringing a bar back or something, a space, right, that is consistent.
That's right down the block.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That area or that specific place has been many different things over the years.
Yeah?
It was originally called Foo Bar.
Okay.
And then something themed after a train. I don't remember what it was called, but now it's Roji Viv, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's cute.
Then I guess the last question, with recent headlines about limiting or banning drag show performances, limiting it to adults, making sure kids stay away from it. With that in mind, what would you say to people who are questioning, or wanting to limit that to against children?
So I have two understandings to these legislations or bans or bills that are being presented. I believe there's only word right now, one of Pennsylvania, that is being talked about being presented. It has not been filed yet. And we do have another anti-trans bill in Pennsylvania that was filed. So with those in mind, the first thing I would say is if we're specifically talking about drag or this area of LGBT, my first is for anyone in the community, it's going to feel a lot of like fear that people have, like they should still hide, they should go back in the closet, and I would say don't. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing that we have support here. You have people like myself and others that you don't need to. Like, we have your back, and we will stand alongside each other because resilience is in our blood as queer people. It comes from the ancestors who have died over years, and like we have as queer people historically, if people want to think we'll back down, we won't. And I think it's foolish to think we would. And so that's my first thing to say is if anyone wants to say we can't exist or be in public spaces or openly, right? And so the drag bills that are being presented, we can't do drag in public spaces. And as today I'm wearing a beautiful dress and I'm like, is this drag to you? Because it's not to me. And I think for those in those terms, it's I'm not going to go away. And none of us should have to, even though people want us to. We're already out. My second thought, though, is a lot of these, specifically when it comes to youth, it's policing parenting is also the way I look at it. And there is nothing harmful that is happening when queer people exist in these spaces. We are just ourselves. We are queer. We are beautiful. We are strong. We are visible. And I say that because, Trans Day of Visibility is coming up, and there are other visibility days that come out throughout the year. And being visible and being proud is something we need to have. But for parents, don't stop loving your kids. Don't stop allowing them to have exposure to different cultures, to different types of people. Because there is nothing wrong with that. That is how people learn, that is how people grow, and that's how people find themselves. It's, if we listen to all stories, I'll take mine, like, I didn't have the exposure of queer culture. I didn't know what it was like to see someone like me growing up. And if I had someone that looked like me, that sounded like me, that I could relate to, it would have been a hell of a lot easier to exist than going through all of the hurdles and obstacles I had to go through to get to where I am today.